Well, we are a little past Halloween, but I found this article that has a few like kind of creepy things in it. So these are 7 horrifying things found living inside people. Wherever you go, you're never alone. There are countless creatures living inside your body, from bacteria to facial mites. The thing is, though, they're all more or less supposed to be there. Even most of the common harmful parasites are merciful in that sense, that we know where they'll go and what they'll do. But then there are other living things that occasionally find their way into the human body and continue to live. Here are 7 things that we found alive inside people who are also alive, much to their horror. Number 1, the growing guava. In 2011, a Taiwanese man went to see a dentist due to a horrendous toothache. By his own admission, he wasn't very fastidious about brushing his teeth, so he figured he had a bad cavity. But it was much more than that. The man's tooth had such a massive cavity that a guava seed had managed to lodge itself inside the tooth. Not only that, the decaying rotten tooth was apparently fertile ground for the seed. It had sprouted and started growing in the man's tooth. The dentist pulled the unsalvageable tooth, but then rather unprofessionally, he called his entire practice to come and gawk at the bizarre thing. The man, embarrassed, left the clinic in a hurry. It is crazy that a seed can like grow inside of a person. You wouldn't think it would get everything it needs to do that.
I heard one story where someone had accidentally inhaled like a tree nut,
and
or
it
something?
like in their lungs, right?
Yeah, and the tree was growing in their lungs.
Yeah, that's crazy. I heard that story too.
Did they have to get surgery and get it out?
Yeah, I think that he had it removed somehow.
Did he grow the tree somewhere? I would try.
He tried to keep it.
Yeah, that tree grew out of my lungs.
It is a story, for sure. Number 2, the souvenir in the knee. In 2013, then 4-year-old Paul Franklin was enjoying a beach with his family when he fell and scraped his knee. His mother slapped a Band-Aid on the scratch, and the boy went on playing. But a few weeks later, a strange bump grew on Paul's knee. Doctors prescribed the boy antibiotics and told his parents not to mess with the bump. Against the doctor's wishes, though, Paul's mom inspected the wound and saw a black thing inside. Thinking it was just a rock, she decided to squeeze it out. It came out, but it wasn't a rock. It was a still living carnivorous sea snail that had survived by feasting on Paul's knee.
Ew.
Paul was absolutely horrified. No, just kidding. He kept the snail as a pet and named it Turbo. So he did go for like here's the story.
Yeah, there you go.
Next, the moving mole. An elderly woman came to see New York dermatologist Josh Zeichner. She had noticed a moving, shape-changing mole on her skin. That's bad news. Traveling moles are one of the most obvious signs of skin cancer. But upon closer inspection, Zeichner noted the woman didn't have cancer. The mole was actually a tick that had somehow burrowed under the woman's skin. We suppose that's still better than a cancer diagnosis. Man, but ticks are fucking creepy, man.
It's actually moving around under your skin.
Yeah. Could have still gave her Lyme disease, possibly.
Yeah.
Number 4, stomach problems. During a 2014 trip to Bali, Australian Dylan Maxwell noticed a strange problem. A red line started stretching its way up towards his chest from an appendix scar on his stomach. Maxwell visited a hospital where the doctors assumed he'd been bit by some bug. They gave him antihistamines for the allergic reaction and sent him on his way. But when the drugs didn't work, Maxwell returned to the hospital. The doctors determined that he had indeed been bitten by a bug. A spider had managed to enter Maxwell's body through his scar and was now crawling around under his skin. The worst part may be that Maxwell had to fly back to Australia before anyone could remove the spider. You'd think if you just like press down hard enough, you'd at least kill it, maybe.
Yeah.
You'd still want it removed, though.
Yeah. But I don't know. You just wouldn't think it'd be able to survive that well in there. But number 5, scratching in her skull. You've probably heard of people finding roaches in their ears. This one's much worse. In 2017, an Indian woman went to see a doctor because of a burning, crawling sensation inside her head. Most people would probably think the woman had gone a bit loopy, but the doctors ran proper tests on her. They discovered a living cockroach inside her skull. Apparently, the pest had crawled into the woman's nostril and squirmed its way into her head. And the best part, the doctors noted that the cockroach didn't want to come out. I mean, you would think she would have, even if she was sleeping, you would think she would feel it like go in a nostril. I mean, unless it's just like a really tiny one.
Yeah, maybe it was tiny when it went in.
I know bugs are stupid, but that stupid to crawl into a living thing's brain, like into its skull, like you probably won't survive that.
I mean,
Well, he did. But.
Yeah, it did. Number 6, always on his mind. In 2010, a 50-year-old Chinese man checked into a UK hospital complaining about severe headaches, detecting weird smells, and having bizarre memory flashbacks. The doctors gave him an MRI scan and noticed an abnormality, but couldn't do much about it. The man's strange symptoms continued over the next 4 years. Only then did doctors finally discover the problem. There was a worm in his brain.
Oh my God.
They pulled out a living, rare tapeworm out of the man's skull. All the bizarre symptoms he experienced were caused by the worm triggering different areas of his brain as it crawled around.
I mean, it must have eaten some of his brain, right? Or something in there.
I don't know, but it is crazy that it could like do all these things, make him feel all these different like weird sensations, you know.
Yeah, making the synapses fire or whatever.
You know, I never watched a lot of like Law and Order, but I do remember I saw an episode of like the SVU one, the sex crimes one, you know, and like apparently this was somewhat based on a true story, but like this woman, she got like caught having sex with like an underage kid or whatever, but they found out like she had a tumor in her brain, and it was like pressing on a part of her brain that like. And then, like, once they removed the tumor, like, she didn't have, like, those urges or whatever, you know? So, like, that's an interesting case because it's like, should that person be guilty? Like, how do you know, like, how much was caused by the tumor, you know?
That's a tough one because I've seen, like, my friend, his grandfather had dementia, and he was a good, upstanding, great person before he had, this... I think he had like a seizure or something.
Oh, okay.
Or his symptoms came on strong at some point, and he started like acting completely different. Oh, I'm being attacked. They're chasing me. We have to go there. This and that. And like he would end up like molesting his granddaughter, who was an adult, but
right.
still, like he would touch her in appropriate ways, and she would let him know, hey, no. And she'd have to talk to him like he's a child because he didn't know any better. Like he was just lost and confused as to everything going on. He was no, that's not what we're doing. Blah blah. Like there's just I don't know. I think it definitely has mental health. Dementia, Alzheimer's, that kind of stuff can really mess with a person.
Well, and even like the Chris Benoit murders, like when they examine his brain, they're like, oh yeah, he had so much CTE that he basically had the brain of like, an 80-year dementia guy. And so it's like, it's one of those things where you're like, you'll never know. It's like, well, like maybe it was solely brought on by that, or maybe he was a monster and nobody really knew, It's one of those things where it's like, it's almost impossible to know.
And, that reminds me of NFL, too, football, where you see a lot of cases of CTE, and, there are a lot of tragic cases that come out of that. Like
lots of, like, suicides, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Man, I remember this match where Benoit got, his signature move of going on the top rope and, like, swan diving onto people.
Right.
Like, someone pulled out a ring bell.
Yeah.
And he swan dived head first into that ring bell, and it rang, so he fucking hit that thing.
Yeah, that was one of those matches he had with Kevin Sullivan, and like they had a bunch of like brutal
Really
matches.
brutal matches.
But yeah, I remember that spot you're talking about, and you didn't really, I didn't really think about it at the time, but yeah, the fact that the bell actually rang, like, he had to have rung his bell too.
Yeah, he got some brain damage.
Okay,
yeah, you could have that much. They say you're like an 80-year-old dementia patient. That's
yeah. Yeah,
you just ruined yourself.
It's sad too, and like you figure with like, well, I guess football is they say sometimes it's not even necessarily about getting a bunch of like bad concussions. Like football players, a lot of times they'll get a bunch of like small ones, that are just like, what people back in the day were like, oh, I just got my bell rung or whatever. It was like, yeah, that's a minor concussion.
Yeah.
And you get enough of those, and yeah, apparently fucks you up. Okay, one more of these, and this one might be the most creepy. I've got a brother in me. Sanju Bhagat from India had always been built weirdly. His stomach was strangely bulbous, but he never gave it much thought. In 1999, his stomach hardened and he began having trouble breathing. At a hospital, the doctors figured he had been carrying a massive stomach tumor all his life and decided to remove it. But when they cut Bhagat open, they didn't find a tumor. They discovered bones, half-formed limbs, hair, jaws, and deformed genitalia. The doctors pulled Bhagat's sibling out of his stomach. As a fetus in his mother's womb, Bhagat had absorbed his twin, who had continued to develop inside his stomach. And the twin was technically still alive when the doctors removed it. I mean, I've heard of like twins absorbing, but I've never heard of that.
I heard of somebody who had something like that they thought was a tumor, but it actually like was someone who was randomly like started growing a fetus in their body. So it's kind of similar, but not quite. But yeah, it's weird that shit happens.
Man, it was technically still alive?
That's what it said.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I wonder that too. Like, did it have a heartbeat?
How fucked up would it be like if it had a brain?
Yeah, that would be... Then you got like ethical questions.
But you know,
What if that was like your whole life?
but you know, wouldn't you think like even if it wasn't causing you problems, if you had like this weird like distended stomach, like
I mean, if you've lived with it your whole life, I don't know.
wouldn't you think at some point you'd be like, let's go to the doctor and just see if this is a thing?
Probably.
Yeah, that's true. How old is this guy?
It doesn't say, but I mean,
He's an adult, probably.
yeah, sounds like he was an adult.
Dang, nobody bothered to check that out. Bro is like the ultimate, well, don't worry about it.
I mean, yeah, it's like, did he ever go to the doctor as a kid and you know, he wasn't like, hey doc, does this look like some, or like, you know, his parents or something like, I know we're in here for him to get like his shots or whatever, but does this look weird?
I got this like almost other person, like sized body.
It's like Quaid in that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. What was that movie?
Total Recall?
Total Recall, yeah. Where he goes to Mars.
Yeah.
I know this is like a classic movie, and I think I've seen scenes out of it, but I've never actually seen the whole movie.
I just recently watched it. It's actually not bad. It's 90s as hell, but
He pulls that giant thing out of his nose.
yeah.
They put a thing in your brain, he's just like, he has that thing to pull it out or whatever.
Yeah, that movie's wild. It's got mutants in it and stuff.
Oh yeah, there's that chick. That's the movie when the chick has 3 titties.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think those were some of the first movie titties I saw.
I just recently saw them for the first time.
You were spoiled the first time.
You're like, these aren't 3 titties. Yeah. 2 titties. I don't want this kind of
Unrealistic body expectations for women. I want that 3rd titty.
I mean, there are people with like superfluous like nipples and things like that.
It's not the same though.
I think there might be people with like 3 boobs in real life, but
I've heard of like people who have like armpit boobs. Like apparently fat forms in like the wrong place, and like it even gets like lactated. And stuff.
That's a fetish for you.
So like
open up that arm, baby.
A person could essentially have like 4 boobs. Yeah.
I want those long ones with like, it's like a cat. It's just like all the way down.
Man, can you imagine the fetish porn videos there'd be if those women existed?
Oh God.
I read a science fiction book where like some dude had like 100 penises grafted on himself. I'm like, this is somebody with some imagination right here.
I mean, as we talked about on the show, there are women that have 2 vaginas in the world. That's a thing.
What are you gonna do with 100 penises? I mean, he's clearly got one line of job lined up for him. Like he's gonna be in porn. That's it.
And are they all functional?
Yeah, right. They're not.
I believe there was some line where he was complaining that he was never able to keep them all hard at the same time.
You would need like a blood reserve. Or something.
Got to get that blood pressure up.
I just see him like, you know,
Passing out.
he's trying to keep all of them hard, but it's like playing that. Dun, 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 dun.
It's like one goes.
Imagine just having like 20 people grinding on you. That'd be like a hallucination. It'd just be so weird.
Like a petri dish.